I think the most interesting thing that happened over the past 24 hours is Chris Long having Malcolm Jenkins on his podcast. And the two of them kind of took you inside the Eagles locker room. And, I'm glad Chris got Malcolm on because those two basically confirmed everything I've been telling people for years. And well, I guess that, in COVID rules, I guess, you can't have too many things at once, Can't have a whole weekend, I guess. But who knows?
Yeah.
At some point, we got to stop this and open things up. But that's another I'm going off on 75 tangents.
Yeah, and I'm joining you. All right, let's get it back to the Eagles. I saw Tim McManus post an article about things that you and I have talked about already at great lengths. It was posted very early this morning on ESPN.com, just talking about the youth of Nick Sirianni's coaching staff. If you want to go that direction, if you want to update us on any of your new articles on Philly Voice or SI.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, we have talked about the youth on the coaching staff pretty extensively. And I wrote about that on Philly Voice, I think, last week. But, I think the most interesting thing that happened over the past 24 hours is Chris Long having Malcolm Jenkins on his podcast. And the two of them kind of took you inside the Eagles locker room. And, I'm glad Chris got Malcolm on because those two basically confirmed everything I've been telling people for years. And it's good to get it on the record from those guys, and that and Chris obviously using colorful language, saying Carson Wentz isn't in a you-know-what. But he has, he's a little bit of an introvert. He has a little bit of a problem I think in one-on-ones with people and reaching out to people. And, I always have tried to express to people, think about it like your own life. And there's some people you probably know that are extroverts, and they're the life of the party, and they walk into a room and they make friends easily and all that kind of nonsense. And from the Eagles standpoint, I always say that's Brandon Graham. That's Brandon Graham. Everybody likes him, lights up the room. That's the type of person he is. And there's other people that are introverts and understated. And Carson's an introvert. And a lot of people take that the wrong way. Problem is, that position, by definition, demands leadership. And it's tough to be a leader when you're that much of an introvert. And those guys kind of explained it great, and I'm glad Chris did the podcast. I'm glad he had Malcolm on because, let's face it, those two guys were two of the biggest leaders in that locker room. You could argue that Malcolm was the leader in that locker room. And they kind of took you back to 2017, and Carson was a young player. And part of what they said is because they had people in that locker room, and it wasn't only Malcolm and Chris Long, but even Torrey Smith and players like that. He didn't need to be a leader because they had so many strong personalities. And then as he got older and as a more of a veteran player, he didn't turn it around. He was sort of the same guy, and that rubs people the wrong way, and it shouldn't necessarily. But that's kind of what happened as far as the personality goes.
Yeah, and just to go off my life experience, like you said, in general, just apply this to your day-to-day life. Like, if you're an introvert and you're in a leadership type of position at work and your team, so to speak, whether it's literally or just in the office, starts to question the direction of the company and the business, and they're looking at you and you don't have the answers and you're not the same leader you were, last month or in the summer, whatever it is, it just picks up so much steam indirectly. Like it says so much without saying anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily right. And I think that's sort of the unfair part of this. But I mean, people expect certain things. And if you are a leader or if you're designated a leader, they expect certain things out of you. And when you do keep to yourself, they sort of take that aloofness as something else. And they take it as being a you-know-what. And it's not necessarily that. It's more of a guy who's uncomfortable doing that type of thing. And, you know, what they both said is he's a good guy, and that's what I've kind of said on this show. He is a good guy, but he just rubs people the wrong way because of the personality. And I don't know how you fix that, because anybody who is an introvert or in the other end of the spectrum, anyone who's an extrovert, it's really difficult to just turn that off or, you know, turn the other end on. You know, it's almost impossible. And, you know, we've talked about people, Brandon Brooks, with his anxiety problem. I mean, these are the real world issues I always talk about in NFL locker rooms that fans just don't think about. They don't care. It's a video game. It's they don't think that's a part of it for whatever reason. And I really can't explain that aspect of it because, hey, sometimes, you know, and I always joke, sometimes you have bad days, whatever, you get in a fight with your wife or your girlfriend, or you know, something goes wrong in your personal life. It could be just a little bit of road rage on the way to work. It ruins your day, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and that's why I always try to circle back and tell people to think about things in your own life. And that's what I'm writing for Philly Voice on Thursday is, you know, and I'll use you as an example here, Ryan. Now think about the last 65 people you've had an interaction with. Now, if I went up to all 65 of those people, would every single one of them like you?
Absolutely not.
And that is an NFL locker room, 53 plus 12 in a non-pandemic season. Plus, you have a few more in injured reserve, so it's actually even higher than that. I mean, it's common sense. Everybody doesn't like everybody, unless you're Brandon Graham. Everybody likes Brandon.
Right, or John McMullen.
That's far from true.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, and I agree with you 1,000%. We talk about that all the time. I've brought it up in the past. There's 53 grown men. It's from all over, different backgrounds, different cultures, different families, everything, raised on different beliefs. Not everyone's going to be holding hands and, you know, singing Kumbaya, but, you know, in a city like Philadelphia, should the quarterback's personality and character traits come up in discussion before you draft them or acquire them or trade for them? Because, you know, and look at the Wentz situation. This is a tough city to play in. You have to have, in my mind, the right character traits to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up. They do. I mean, typically quarterbacks are sort of extroverts. I mean, that's, you know, one of the things you're trying to get through in the pre-draft process is the fact that leadership is a big part of that position. So in the due diligence, should the Eagles have figured that out? I don't know if it's possible. But, again, I always talk about, and, you know, in a larger sense, everybody talks about the entitlement of the quarterback position in this league, and it's not just Carson Wentz. We've been through the names: Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, just this offseason, Aaron Rodgers, just during this season, Tom Brady, so forth and so on. So, I mean, everybody's got some of this, whether it's entitlement, whether it's being a horse's you-know-what at times. Everybody's got some of this at that particular position because sometimes you got to be, sometimes you got to yell at people, sometimes you got to motivate people. Everybody has different personalities, as we mentioned. So what's the difference? What's the difference between those guys and Carson Wentz? There's only one difference, and it's obvious. Those guys perform. Carson didn't perform. Carson was the same person in 2017 when he was performing, and nobody had a problem. Same exact guy. Nobody had a problem. That's the only difference. If you're not going to perform, then people are going to start bringing up these ancillary issues, which really are ancillary issues and really don't matter all that much.
I agree, but I would say this, and this is just me speculating based off the information we know. I would assume, and it's human nature, this isn't a knock, I would assume Carson wasn't the same guy. Like, he's an introvert, yes, so he's, he could come off maybe like a you-know-what when he's not, like everything you just said, but I would find it hard to believe he was able to do everything the same this past season that he did in 2017 because of everything going on around him and the team's failures and, just everything. I doubt he was the same guy, and that's okay, but that's a factor.
Well, no, by the same guy, I mean his personality didn't change. He was the same person. Obviously, the circumstances created change, but I think that was all tied to the performance. Yeah, he got pissed off when he got benched and stopped talking to Doug and started texting him, which I think is immature, but nonetheless, that's part of, the entitlement of that position that I kind of talked about, and it spun off from being benched, again, the lack of performance. He was talking to Doug before he got benched. That was the conduit of it. So, everything from the standpoint of, being a very religious person. I mean, there are people that get that are not religious and get uncomfortable around that kind of thing. So all of these dynamics were in that locker room, and those dynamics never changed. But nobody cared when he was playing at an MVP level for the most part. When things went off the rails, then it became, an issue. And that's just the way it is. I mean, everyone always jokes in the NFL that winning cures every single ill. Same thing on a more personal level with a player. If you play well, and we see it with high profile, maybe personal conduct issues. Guys can get in trouble in this league off the field. But guess what? If they're great players, they're going to get chance after chance after chance. If they're not great players, if they're the 53rd guy on the roster, what's going to happen? They're going to get released, and that's going to be an end of them. That's just what the league is.
We're talking with John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. All right, John, we only have about 10 minutes, so we can possibly carry this topic into tomorrow's segment. Jalen Hurts or drafting a quarterback at number 6, and we've touched on this already, but if I have to force you to pick one or the other, just for the sake of conversation, you can illustrate both pros and cons to either option, but which one do you lean towards?
I lean towards them taking a quarterback, and again, it all depends on the evaluation. And these snapshots, I have to do my first 3-round mock draft for Sports Illustrated tomorrow, so I'm wrangling what to do at number 6. Do I have to trade up? And it's interesting because Daniel Jeremiah came out with his top 50 today, and he's got Justin Fields down at 12. He's been kind of falling a little bit. That's how these things work. People are nitpicking, and they're looking at him and saying, okay, I think somebody tweeted, and I haven't gone through the film myself. Somebody tweeted he came off his first progression 7 times in the entire season. 7 times in the entire season. And when he did, bad things happened. So that lack of processing speed, and people are nitpicking, and they're saying, wow, maybe this guy's got some holes and he's starting to fall. But as you get closer to the draft, trust me, quarterbacks are going to get pushed up the board. They always do. Especially if you're as talented as he. From a skill set standpoint, he's certainly got more talent than Zach Wilson. You can even argue he's got more physical gifts than Trevor Lawrence, although I would disagree with that. But ultimately, I think he's going to get pushed up the board. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to be at 6 because somebody's going to trade up. But right now, in the snapshot we have at this point, without pro days, without everybody panicking, he's falling. So right now, he would be there, most likely at 6. Eagles would have to take him if he's there at 6. Have to. I mean, to me, it's not even a question. It's a no-brainer. You just have to. You're not in that position a lot, and when you're in the top 10, just look at the history of quarterbacks. And, everybody brings up Tom Brady at 199. Everybody brings up Russell Wilson as a third-round pick, even Drew Brees as a second-round pick. Okay, yeah, those guys exist. Now do the numbers and show me the typical 6th-round quarterback. Never mind 6 rounds. Show me the typical 2nd-round quarterback. The odds are astronomically against you. The easiest way to get a great quarterback in this league is to be in the top 10. So if he's there, you got to take him.
And when you say he's only gone off his first progression 7 times, I mean, can't you respond with, well, the team was that good? Like, that guy was open.
Well, it is, but people hold that against you. People, for instance, even Mac Jones is a better example of that. People hold that against Mac Jones because Mac Jones's numbers are unbelievable. I mean, they're phenomenal. But they look at what he had at Alabama and they say, well, what does it really mean? Because he's throwing to wide open receivers. They're so much better than their opponents. What does it really mean? So that's the difficulty in sort of, trying to, in scouting. I mean, you're trying to project. And that just doesn't exist in the NFL. There are no Alabamas. There are no Ohio States. Even the great teams, you don't have those huge open windows in the NFL. And that's why you have to sort of project these players forward. And that's why it's more difficult than people think it is.
Yeah, and, you bring up Mac Jones, and, I hate the people that knock him because he's the quarterback for Alabama. I'm not going to hold that against him. I actually think he could possibly become a decent NFL starter. He could have a solid NFL career. I think he has some potential, and people say, well, I mean, you could have played quarterback for that team.
Well,
and it's like, no, I couldn't.
Well, yeah, they do say that, and they hold it against him. It was interesting because Devante Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, a lot of people want the Eagles to pick at number 6, but I don't even think he's going. I think he's going after the Eagles. Somebody asked him who's better, Tua or Mac Jones, and Tua was in the conversation to be a number 1 overall pick before he got hurt, and still ended up as a very, very high pick. And he said Mac Jones, and wasn't even debating it. So I mean, there's an example, and by the way, and I talked about this process with Fields. He's been, taking some hits a little bit recently. It's been the opposite for Mac Jones. He seems to be going up the board, and people are starting to think he's going to go a lot earlier than expected. And you're going to have this back and forth as we get closer and closer. And ultimately, as I said, I think Fields is going to go probably top 3 or 4. Somebody's going to trade up to get him. I do think Mac will be a first-round pick. It'll be interesting to see how high he goes. But, yeah, he's gaining steam. And when you do have somebody like Devante Smith who played with both quarterbacks and is a great receiver and he's that emphatic about it, that should tell you something.
We'll have to get more into this conversation tomorrow night at 7:30 with our NFL Eagles insider, John McMullen. John, we just have a couple minutes. I just want your quick thoughts on, two stories. And first, about Big Ben, because it seems like there's some sort of unofficial confirmation that he's returning to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and that was probably expected. I mean, they were going to have a really difficult time from a salary cap standpoint, and both sides. I mean, Ben was coming back from a really, really serious injury, had the great start, the team as a whole, and then it kind of fell off at the end, and he didn't look very good at the end when they did fall off. So I think there's concerns from both sides. I don't think Ben would have had a ton of interest outside Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh can do that much because of the salary cap implications, and he's willing to work with them. They're willing to work with Ben, and he's meant so much to that organization. That's a guy who's got to finish his career in Pittsburgh, and if he plays as I think the farther you get off that surgery, in theory, the better you should feel. So we'll see. Obviously, he's a declining player. There's no question about that. You bring age into it as well. But the Steelers don't have a better option. He doesn't have a better option. So, I mean, it makes sense that they're going to stick together.
And before I let you go, I just want your thoughts on the Tiger Woods story, because that is scary, just first and foremost. And that car is a shell of itself. And just your thoughts on that accident.
Yeah, that's one that hits you hard, and especially because I got that L.A. Sheriff's Department press release pretty quickly and didn't give a whole lot of information on it. So your mind starts to wander and think about horrible things about, one of the only things they had in there was he had to be taken out with the jaws of life. So you're thinking, wow, this could be really, really serious as far as life-threatening. So the positive news is obviously significant leg injuries, but not life-threatening. So, I mean, it's sad. I do think it's going to obviously impact his career pretty dramatically. He's already had so many injury issues. But, hey, man, you don't even think about that when you know the potential of how bad it could have been. And that's the positive part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was conscious, able to communicate, I guess, when police and responders arrived. So that's a story we'll all keep an eye on there. Tiger had surgery. It seems to be 2 broken legs, but nothing's really officially been released. So, all right, John, I appreciate it, man. We'll do it again tomorrow night, talking more Eagles, quarterback, and everything in between.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Sorry for the tangents.
I love your tangents. Never apologize.
All right, buddy.
Later. There he is, Johnny Mac.
The middle.
That's what I told you, but I got a hangover, man. So
what is this hangover?
Yeah, what's with this hangover?
Right,
what happened yesterday?
Cheap vodka, bro. Cheap vodka, man.
What?
Well, I took pineapple vodka with the pineapples, and I infused it for like a week or two.
That's too much pineapple.
Pineapple is terrible.
It was so sweet that you would just keep on drinking it. I just kept on drinking it.
You say you took pineapple vodka and then infused it into pineapples.
Yes.
I mean, there's sorority girls right now at Penn State that are laughing at you, Barrett. He took pineapple vodka and infused it into pineapples.
I thought it would be a better taste, and it was a better taste. It was a great taste. It just went down too fast. Went down way too fast, man. And next thing you know, man, 3 Shades to the Wind, watching Queen Latifah.
Oh, my God. That's the line of the day.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.
NFL Eagles insider Johnny Mac. Follow John McMullen on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, and host of Extending the Play. Let's bring John into the picture now. John, how we doing, my friend?
Doing well. That's got to be a net positive for the Raptors, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, that's certainly a net positive. And thank you for commenting on my tweet because I was wrong there. And just for the listeners, I put out that, the Sixers haven't won a road game against Toronto since 2012, but that's a regular season road game.
Yeah, you could argue the playoffs are more important. So I think that's an important. That was a great series. That was the apex of the Sixers, that series, if you think about it.
It really was. I mean, that team, listen, what could have been if that quadruple doink didn't go Toronto's way, Kawhi Leonard's way.
How many doinks was that in a Game 7? Was that quadruple doink?
I think it was at least 4. It might have even been 5.
Yeah, that's a tough way to lose Game 7. But think about how close they were to the Eastern Conference Final. But then again, they were close to the Eastern Conference Finals the one year where Derrick Rose got hurt, Noah got hurt when Chicago was really good, but nobody took that seriously. I don't know why people didn't take that seriously. It's not their fault guys got hurt.
Well, I was at the game in Philly, although they weren't the higher seed, so I don't think they clinched when I was there. But I was at one of those games in Philly against that Chicago Bulls team. But wasn't that a first-round playoff series, John?
Yeah, that was a first round. But ultimately they got to, I believe, Game 7 against a really good Boston team. And Lavoy Allen, of all people, was giving Kevin Garnett headaches. Remember Lavoy Allen?
Wow. Yep. That goes to show where the state of that team was that year. I mean, yeah, they had like Spencer Halls, right? That team was a joke.
He was great in that series. He was great.
He was.
It was pretty amazing. I always remember Lavoy because his nickname on Twitter, his Twitter handle, not his nickname, was Broad Street Bully something. And he was the only guy. Kevin Garnett, a big part of his game was intimidating people. And he was a rookie, so he didn't know any better. And he wasn't intimidated. It's pretty amazing to watch.
Yeah, that was a hell of a series. Very entertaining. And then, like you said, the quadruple doink. And now let's fast forward to this year. We'll see what the Sixers are able to do playoff-wise, and they're tipping off now.
One more Sixers note.
Please.
I know we got to get to the Eagles, but Tobias Harris has got to be an all-star before Ben Simmons. I'm sorry.
Before Ben? I said before Ben, John. That's, I don't disagree that Tobias is deserving, but I don't know, ahead of Ben Simmons?
If there's only 2 all-stars on the Sixers, Tobias has got to be number 2. That's my opinion.
Hey, I mean,
this season. Not saying he's a better player, saying he's having a better year.
Right. No, I'm with you. And listen, I wouldn't completely disagree, but I just think Ben, despite my love to hate on him at times, I certainly think he's just like a lock all-star this year, despite some of his struggles. But Tobias has been unbelievable. I've been critical of him plenty of times as well.
Well, somebody's got to be left off. I think Booker got left off in the Western Conference, which is astonishing. But, you have to make decisions, and I think Tobias Harris deserves it more this season. Again, not to say that he's a better overall player, because I don't think he is, but I think he's having a tremendous season, and he should be honored in that type of circumstance.
I absolutely agree, and I think the NBA system on, announcing and setting the All-Stars is certainly flawed, to say the least. I mean, Alex Caruso was one of the lead vote getters from the fans.
Yeah, well, I would also like to go back. I would also like to go back to Eastern Conference versus Western Conference. Just shut up and play the game, people. If your attention span is that low, just don't watch it. What are we? What are we at? Team what and team what? I can't even tell you.
I have no clue. I just saw that they announced the starters and they had captain next to their name. So like LeBron James is the captain for the West, and I think it is East versus West this year. And I don't even know who the captain is for the East. I need to maybe do some research and come prepared for that.
East versus West, because I could have sworn I got a press release that said Doc Rivers clinched being the coach of team something or other. I couldn't get bothered. I had no interest in reading it.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. I don't even know, and that's sad. But I know that they're squeezing in the dunk contest, I want to say at halftime of the All-Star game.